Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Thursday's Theology. My name is Jeff, and I'm your host, and we are continuing in our series exploring the theology of the Assassin's Brotherhood. Now, again, I've told you multiple times that I am a huge nerd when it comes to Assassin's Creed. I've played all the games through, some of them twice. I read the comics. I look at fan fiction. I am deep into Assassin's Creed. I am a very, very much a nerd when it comes to Assassin's Creed. I love it, and I love theology, and I love the fact that I have this platform to combine the two. So this week we are going to talk about the 3 ironies of the Assassin's Brotherhood. Now, if you're not familiar with these, it requires you to have a deep dive into the Assassin's Creed Brotherhood and the rationale and the just everything that goes along with it. But the 3 ironies that we're going to cover today is number 1, assassins seek to promote peace but commit murder. Number 2, assassins seek to open the minds of men but require obedience to rules. And number 3, assassins seek to reveal the dangers of blind faith yet practice it themselves. Now again, as soon as these popped up on the screen and as soon as these popped up in the Assassin's Creed world, my mind just lit up with all the possibilities of how it connects to theology. So let's jump in and tackle these one by one. So the first one, assassins seek to promote peace but commit murder. I'm just going to go on record as saying that this should never, ever, ever be true of Christians. But unfortunately, it is. Now, what I mean by that is there's this thing that I mentioned last week that I wanted to follow up and talk a little bit about called just war theory. And just war is like a war being just. It's not like, oh, it's just war. It's a war being justified. So just war theory basically says that there are circumstances in which Christians can take the lives of others when the circumstances are right, when the rationale is right, when the justification is there. It is okay for Christians to take the life of others. I vehemently disagree with just war theory. I absolutely disagree just because of how I read the Bible and how I interpret a lot of the passages, especially the Sermon on the Mount, which we talked a little bit about last week. But the Sermon on the Mount does challenge us to consider what to do with violence, because when Jesus says, turn the other cheek, pray for your enemies, go the extra mile, these are not like theoretical things. He's instructing us basically to submit to the violence and to submit. But the idea of submitting to violence doesn't mean you condone it or allow it to go unchecked. Because by turning the other cheek, we talked a little bit about this last week, you are exposing the violence of the perpetrator. By going the extra mile, you are exposing the exploitation and oppression of your enemies. So the idea of the Sermon on the Mount challenging us, it truly challenges us and any claim we have to use violence as a retaliatory measure. Now, there's a really, really good author. If you ever want to do a deep dive into theology, I highly recommend this book. It's Greg Boyd and his book, Crucifixion of the Warrior God. And basically, I'm going to try to distill it down to like 1 or 2 sentences because it is a very, very thick work. It's really, really good, but it's very, very dense. But essentially, the Crucifixion of the Warrior God talks about how when we look at Jesus, we often say that he is the fulfillment of all of the Old Testament prophecy, which is true. We look at Jesus and say like, oh, he fulfilled everything that the prophets foretold about who the Messiah would be. So what Greg Boyd argues is that we have to do the same thing with the violence in the Old Testament and New Testament. And basically what he means is that when Jesus dies on the cross, we are crucifying any claim to violent retaliation we can have. So in essence, Greg Boyd argues that we must give up our claim to violence because Christ died the most violent death, and that takes away any excuse we have to use violence. So that's just an interesting tie-in I thought I want to offer you guys. So number 2, assassins seek to open the minds of men but require obedience to rules. So this one is again kind of a really funny one to cover in Christian theology, because we talk a lot about this thing called freedom in Christ. And freedom in Christ is this idea that we are free to become fully human. We are free to become fully ourselves, the way God designed us to be. However, following Christ requires us following his commandments, so following his rules. So this fits directly into the assassin's irony, because we seek to open the minds of people. We seek to free them from the bondage and slavery of ignorance, and just giving them the means to understand that there's something more going on than just happenstance. There's something going on more than just the circumstances they're in. But following Christ does require you to follow his rules. So again, that fits directly into the assassin's irony. Now, the big irony that I would like to highlight for Christian theology is that God's grace is a free gift. God's grace in the flesh of Christ is a free gift. However, it will cost you everything. So the free gift of grace will cost you everything. It'll cost you your life. It'll cost you your goals. It'll cost you your future. It'll cost you everything. So I just wanted to bring up that irony because I thought it was cool. And last but not least, number 3, assassins seek to reveal the dangers of blind faith, yet practice it themselves. Now, I wanted to also say that I think way too many Christians have blind faith. And what I mean by that is that a lot of Christians just accept for face value what they read and never really challenge it, never really question it. And I think I work with college students a lot, and I think one of the things that really stuck out to me about this whole irony is that upwards of about 70%, last time the study was done, it showed about 70%, but upwards about 70% of students who grow up in the church walk away from the church after they go to college. And because it's a very multifaceted issue, but one of the main reasons I think there are a lot of college students that walk away is because we do not prepare them to have an intellectual faith. We don't prepare them to ask tough questions of their faith. We don't tell them like, oh yeah, it's okay to question or to wrestle with your faith. We just tell them, oh, you have to believe this, you have to believe this, you have to believe this. So when they go off to college and they take their freshman bio class or freshman philosophy class and their professors rip apart faith, they're not going to have a lot of foundation to go back to because they haven't practiced it. They haven't been taught to wrestle with or question their faith. So I encourage college students to always wrestle with their faith, always wrestle with the deep, dark questions you have for faith. I do it all the time. I don't have a perfect faith. I don't walk on air every day like, oh, God is going to take care of me today. Like I challenge God. I question God. I question my faith all the time. And I think my faith has grown significantly the past few years because I have challenged it. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. I also wanted to say that faith is not the same thing as ignorance. I think we can often portray Christians who have faith of like, oh, they're just being ignorant. They just don't understand science. They don't understand blah, 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 blah. But faith is not the same thing as ignorance. At least it shouldn't be. People who have blind faith, I think there's a little bit of a blur between the two. But faith and ignorance are two very different things. You can have faith in something without being ignorant about it. And that is the whole goal, I think, for Christians, is to continually get to know who God is. Theology is the study of God. We've talked about that multiple times. And we have to be studying and finding out who God is if we're going to have solid faith. I wouldn't expect any of my students to have faith in Christ if they didn't understand who Christ was to begin with. So faith is not the same thing as ignorance. And to close this episode, I actually wanted to end with a quote by the great assassin himself, Altair, and he says, "Our creed does not command us to be free, it commands us to be wise." Let me read that one more time. Our creed does not command us to be free, it commands us to be wise. So be wise, have faith, don't be ignorant, and don't have blind faith. Seek to promote peace, but never ever commit murder. Seek to open the minds of people, but tell them that following Christ requires following the rules and commandments. And seek to reveal the dangers of blind faith and explore your faith for yourself. Those are the 3 ironies of the Christian faith. Wow, isn't that great? Thank you again for joining me. My name is Jeff. I am your host. And remember, theology doesn't always have to be difficult. It is simply the study of who God is. Take care. We'll see you next week.